Dr. Nirmala, thank you so much for joining us today. So, menopause and the challenges related to menopause. 50% of the world's population is suffering lack of period for the preceding 12 consecutive months. When you tell this to a patient, won't they be feeling overwhelmed because particularly muscle training, strength training? But looking it from the medical point of view, I can see that she was struggling. Vaginal dryness affecting personal relationship or taking medicines regularly. Skipping period in your late 40s is always normal. Women come to us and talk about their symptoms. Because I know somebody who has gone through it, and then it was said that it was because of menopause that she is going, who came to me for with the history of irregular periods. Hello and welcome back to our podcast, Scrubbed In. Today we are diving into a topic that touches almost every woman's life but is often spoke about in hushed tones: menopause, perimenopause, and even premature menopause. For many women, this stage comes with a mix of physical changes, emotional ups and downs, and sometimes even identity shifts. And yet, conversations around it are filled with myths, stigma, and silence. That's why today's episode is so much important. We are truly honored to have with us Dr. Nirmala, an experienced gynecologist who has guided countless women through these journeys. She not only brings medical expertise, but also compassion, real patient stories, and the kind of insight that every woman and every family needs to hear. Dr. Nirmala, thank you so much for joining us today. So, the topic for today we want to talk about is menopause and the challenges related to menopause. And why do you think that these are the topic that has to be addressed in today's conditions? Uh, Thank you for having me here. And thank you for the most important and crucial question about menopause. Why open conversations are relevant and important around the menopause, and we'll look at it now. Menopause has often been shrouded in silence, stigma, shame, although 50% of the world's population is suffering through with menopausal symptoms. Why does open conversation, why is it important, and how is it going to help? Menopause is not something a rare genetic condition. It is at least 50% of the world's population are experiencing menopausal symptoms as a consequence of biological change. Just like puberty, it is not a medical pathology. Why is it shrouded in silence? Because menopause is associated with the end of fertility, and women are tuned to associating themselves with the youth, fertility, and menopause actually spells the end of fertility. So, hence, it is shrouded in silence, taboo, and shame. As a consequence of this, women enter menopause with the total misinformation, lack of information, and no one to verbalize their feelings. They believe their symptoms are unique to them, they are going crazy, and they have no one to share their symptoms. So, this misinformation is keeping them in silence, and they are suffering unnecessarily. And secondly, because of the silence, there is not much awareness either for the public, the family, the working environment, or the governments and the research bodies to push for more research into this underfunded midlife health for women, to bring on innovation, newer products, and such like to help women's living, women's experience of menopause, women's way of battling these symptoms. Hence, I believe open conversations are essential to push for these changes both at a personal, societal, and governmental level to improve women's health conditions across the board. Wow, that's such a detailed explanation, doctor. Thank you so much. I mean, to know that a woman goes through so much of trouble and they're not able to accept what exactly the bodily changes they are going through. Yes, I think it is the need for the hour that many of us have to know about it. So now going on to the next question, doctor, I want to know, like, many women, they get confused about premature menopause, perimenopause, and actual menopause. So, what exactly are the difference between these two? Can you please explain that to
Sure.
us?
Thank you yet again. Another useful question and a very common question. I'll start with menopause. Menopause is something like an endpoint. After somebody has been through lack of period for the preceding 12 consecutive months, it's called menopause. And this normally occurs to women globally somewhere between the age of 45 to 55. So that's the end of the period. That's when the ovaries stop releasing eggs and no more estrogen and progesterone is produced by the ovaries. Perimenopause is preceding the menopause, the transition period, if you like. It can last up to 8 to 10 years before the menopause. So this can be sometimes from mid 30s or mid 40s up to the stopping of the periods. That's a transition period. Then premature menopause, or there is one other terminology called premature and early menopause and primary ovarian insufficiency. So, premature menopause is something when a woman goes through menopause before the age of 40. Early menopause is if the woman goes through menopause before the age of 45, because we said menopause is between 45 to 55. So now let's look at this premature menopause, which is also called as primary ovarian insufficiency. Here it is not a final endpoint, but it is the ovarian function is declining. And these girls, because it's affecting women below the age of 40, the incidence of this happening is about 1%.
Okay.
If it were to affect, if it affects women below 30, the incidence is 1 in 1,000 women, and below 20 is 1 in 10,000. It's rare, but it's not unheard of. It's not a condition where people have never heard of. This is the incidence. So these are the definitions and the age at which women experience this.
Okay, so primary ovarian insufficiency is something which is a new term for many of us. So, does this have something to do with the AMH count?
And a good question. Primary ovarian insufficiency, by definition, is based on the age at which it affects women. It is because of declining or rather fluctuating ovarian function. Here, ovaries are declining at an age which is unexpected. So, because they are so young, the fertility needs are a concern for them. And also, getting this diagnosis or not having a period or absence of period for prolonged periods of time is disheartening to a woman and psychologically demoralizing because they are obviously concerned about their fertility potential and outcome. AMH is a test, as a blood test that tells about the egg reserve in a woman. It only indicates what is going on. And primary ovarian insufficiency, 90% of the time is idiopathic, wherein we don't know the cause. In the less than 10%, it may be because of genetic causes. For example, X chromosome related problems, Turner syndrome, Fragile X syndrome, galactosemia, or it may be from autoimmune disorders. Maybe the person as a child had some surgery for any type of childhood cancer,
Okay.
any surgical treatment, chemotherapy, radiotherapy that affected the gonads, the ovaries, specifically, or if ovaries had to be removed at an earlier age. So any of these can push them into primary ovarian insufficiency. So for them, if they want to conceive, then the options are spontaneous conception may happen, and the chances of that is 5 to 10%. Most commonly, women resort to IVF and donor eggs.
Okay, that's good to know. So, how common is this? Just the 5 to 10% that you have told?
Spontaneous conception.
Spontaneous consumption. And have you come across any sort of cases of this sort that you would like to share with us?
Yes, I've seen a few in my life, in my career. Uh, and more often than not, for these girls, the primary source is for us to support them psychologically, emotional support, psychological support. The family needs to be educated about this. And we offer a hormone replacement not only for psychological satisfaction of getting a period, but also this is a medical condition that requires us to take care of the long term bone health and cardiovascular health. And don't forget the cognitive decline that happens with estrogen situation. So this is a medical condition that requires treatment as recommended by a medical professional.
Okay, right. So, right now we have spoken about the awareness what we need. So the next segment, I would like to talk about the early signs what a woman would experience when she is going through menopause. So can you please tell me some early signs and symptoms that a woman has been experiencing when she enters the menopause age, and how do you differentiate that from the normal period or any sort of psychological changes that she goes through?
That's a good question, because many of the symptoms women associate with the perimenopause or menopause is because of fluctuating estrogen level.
Okay.
And this estrogen works at a neurotransmitter level. It is responsible for regulating the hormone called serotonin released in the brain, which is the feel good hormone. So, whenever there is fluctuation in estrogen, say in the perimenopausal period, like we said, in the transition before menopause, it is affecting the feel good factor.
Okay.
Because of fluctuating estrogen, so what's happening to the woman at an individual level is that she's seeing irregularity to her periods. The periods are either coming too often or too late.
Okay.
They are very short or they are very prolonged. So some disturbance to her regular cycle. That's what she notices. And we are seeing increasing number of women come to us saying that they are noticing redistribution of fat.
Yes.
So this is a common presenting symptom nowadays, in addition to irregularity of periods. Redistribution of fat, particularly in the lower abdomen and upper thigh, it's again because of estrogen fluctuation. And hair loss, vasomotor symptoms or hot flushes, night sweats, sleeplessness. Because of sleeplessness, irritability, feeling on edge, anger, wired up, vaginal dryness affecting personal relationship. These are some of the symptoms that women experience. In addition, there are silent things that are happening which we don't know, which no one is talking because they are not having symptoms. One is increasing cardiovascular risk from fluctuating estrogen. Bone loss and muscle loss is happening, predisposing to falls, fractures, osteoporosis, osteopenia.
My God.
Declining cognitive function. So brain fog, you're losing it, and we're not able to complete a sentence. I can't focus on my job. I'm doing a high-powered job, but I'm not able to even complete a sentence. So these are some of the things that women are coming to us increasingly in the last few years, I would say.
But according to the society, when a woman tells all these things, they just say it, everyone goes through it, right? So I think a support group is something which is really important for women to go through this.
Yes.
Okay.
I would definitely say so. I mean, first of all, before support group for the woman is important. And as we said earlier, there's a lot of misinformation and silence about menopause because of the taboo, shame, and all these things. Education has to happen at an individual, family, corporate, society, government level, just to help women understand what is happening to them, and for the families to understand what's happening to them, so they can avoid arguments and work and live with each other peacefully. Yes, that's true. So I think it is a very difficult time, and also you have to remember this is a time in a woman's life when she's having to take some major life decisions. She'll have aging parents, have teenage children, and her own hormone fluctuation, and she's at the peak of her career. So, and there are women who have to revisit their roles, and this is the time we are experiencing emptiness syndrome as well. Children have left, so you're alone, and the aging parents and your own hormone fluctuations, and you're revisiting. So beyond these roles, who am I? That identity crisis occurs to many women, asking, who am I? What am I doing? What is my role in life?
Okay.
So it's not an easy time. It's basically perimenopause is a storm in a teacup.
It's the right way to put it, because I mean, sitting here and listening to it, the the all the symptoms that you told, it is something which every other woman
Everyone
keeps
goes.
telling that. Because I remember my mom telling me that I feel like this, that, and when I was a teenager, I was like, okay, I didn't understand what she
Yeah.
was going through.
Yeah.
But looking it from the medical point of view, I can see that she was struggling to go through
And you would
this.
have seen her friends and family dismiss her completely.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely dismiss. I'm like, they don't really care, because one thing, they don't have the time to listen to it, and I think everyone feels that everyone goes through
Yeah.
it. So
What are you talking about? What are you
yeah,
complaining about?
exactly, generalizing the symptoms, if I'm not
Yes.
wrong.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So, have you had any sort of inspiring story of yours, uh, patient or any known person who has gone through this and has come out of it?
I mean, many of us, I would say, many women we see, because now there is a lot of information. In addition to misinformation on social media, I have to say there's no dearth of information. And sooner or later, women come to us and talk about their symptoms. And they've started talking to each other in the workplace as well, which is a very, very positive sign.
Okay.
Because I see increasing number of women in my day-to-day practice consulting me saying, I heard this in the workplace. What can you tell me about HRT? Or my sister in another country has been prescribed this. I think I also have these symptoms. Can you prescribe or can you tell me about this? And on the other hand, you have women having the symptoms come to you for a consultation. And once you have informed them, this is what it is, it's normal, every woman goes through it. Just because no one is talking to you about it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And there are some girls who have assured me that just the knowledge, just the information sharing was enough for them to tackle things at home and work.
That's great.
Yeah.
But there is a negative side to this as well, right? Because over information, you keep reading to it and you kind of feel that
Yeah.
everything is
Like
happening,
they
right?
call here manifesting techniques.
Manifesting, yeah. And in medical colleges, at least for me, one of my professor told when we were transitioning from the second year to the third year, that's when we start seeing the patients. So whenever we see the patients, we kind of feel what they are feeling like. Oh, I also have this symptom.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
he used to call it as a third year symptoms. So
Yes, I agree. You know, that applies. That's a negative side of social media, isn't it?
okay,
And too much information is there. Of course, there is so many positives as well as negatives. I think we have to use our discretion in where we are sourcing our information and knowledge from. And that's what I tell to all my patients, that you source your information from reliable medical sources, such as the colleges across the globe and the menopausal societies across the globe, or reliable sources of information. Healthcare professional qualified in menopause is the right source of, will provide the right source of information for you.
okay.
So we need to be careful in choosing whom we are taking the advice from.
Okay. So, right now, like you say, there are differences in the professionals who deal with menopause as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
Because we do get in our practice that a patient would tell us, I've seen X number of gynecologists who have dismissed my symptoms,
Okay.
or I've heard how many consultations. Why didn't somebody say this few years ago or before the 10th consultation? Why didn't I hear the statement that I need this and this is what needs to be done? Or, lifestyle modification exists. Not necessarily we are prescribing medications all the time.
Okay.
There is a whole package of information tailored to menopausal needs. And they tell us that they have consulted with so many doctors over a period of time, and who have just said it's okay, who patients feel they were not listened to. So that's what I hear.
Okay. So, okay, doctor, that's really good to know so many things. So, talking about certain sensitive topics that we have spoken about premature menopause, or rather the primary ovarian insufficiency. If a patient of having such problems comes to you, it's very challenging for you to address this topic to them. So, how do you go about telling them? Because it is pretty sensitive, right?
Yes. So if we first of all, I'll establish what they already know about the condition and what is being done so far, and where they are in their needs. Is it a fertility need the patient is looking for, or is she looking for support in terms of long-term health? What has worked so far, what has not worked so far? Everything depends on the treat. We need to have treatment goals.
Okay.
We need to know our patient, and we need to know what is practical for them. And then the long-term health benefits of HRT for a patient with primary ovarian insufficiencies, for, as I said earlier, cardiovascular, bone protection, and cognitive protection. So we recommend HRT for these patients up to the age of natural menopause, which is up to 55.
Okay. So they have to keep taking medicines regularly.
Yes.
Okay. So about Have you seen any sort of patient from maybe some say like below 30 or 30, early 30s who have come to you with this problem and you were really shocked to see the result of premature menopause or like how primary
It
sufficiency?
is it is rare, but it is not an unknown condition or unheard of. It
Mhm.
is always disheartening to see another girl go through this, of course. But although it's psychologically demanding for both the practitioner and the patient, we there are treatment options available, and we are here to signpost and guide the patient.
Okay. So what exactly are the treatment options for them apart from there are there no chances of natural consumption for them?
Only 5 to 10
Only
percentage
5 to
visit.
7.
Yeah, it is possible, but 5 to 10 percentage. If that is the option they want to choose, then they need to be realistic in their expectations.
Okay. So how do you balance medical guidance with emotional support in these cases?
Uh, Emotional guidance and empathy is part of medical care, and not only in this condition, for any condition, I think. So again, understanding your patient, seeing what are the sources available, what is the expected outcome, is how we can guide. We can tailor care for each individual patient.
Basically, when you talk about menopause, there are times where you have to go through lifestyle changes as well. So, are there any sort of lifestyle changes that you recommend your patients so that they will be able to navigate this path a little more confidently?
Yes. Lifestyle modification is a cornerstone for any treatment, and more so for menopausal symptoms. Without lifestyle modification, no medicine is in the world is going to fix your problems. Although lifestyle modification is not going to fix all the problems, and no medicine is going to fix it, has to be a combination of lifestyle modification and medical management as appropriate. So what is essential? What advice I give to patients is lifestyle starts with diet.
Okay.
So diet has to be rich in complex carbohydrate, lean protein, healthy fats. In addition to calcium and vitamin D, because I said loss of bone mass and muscle mass, which is why the protein component and the calcium and vitamin D is recommended.
Okay.
And depending on your cultural beliefs, your usual dietary habits, you'll have to source what is the food that is rich in calcium, vitamin D, and the protein sources.
Okay.
So there are vegetarians, there are non-vegetarians, meat eaters, non-meat eaters. So we'll have to look at the food that is particularly useful for that patient.
Okay.
I can't just tell go and eat complex carbohydrate, which complex carbohydrate. So depending on patient's cultural beliefs, religious beliefs, and what is practical for a patient. So we have to pick the carbohydrates, lean protein, and calcium, vitamin D sources. And of course, there are supplements for calcium and vitamin D we recommend if they are deficient. And nutrition advice, same. Nutrition advice will follow. I mean, the nutrition and diet is in one recommendation. And exercise is non-negotiable.
Okay.
So particularly muscle training, strength training 3 times a week, and cardiovascular training 3 times a week, because cardiovascular health will be affected with the declining estrogen hormones. So unless you do take care of your cardiovascular health, it's not going to work. And bone and muscle we are losing, hence why we need strength training 3 times a week. So minimum 150 minutes per week of moderate to severe intensity is essential of exercise. And strength training 3 times a week is non-negotiable. That's how I would say. So that's your diet, nutrition, exercise. Hydration, 3 to 4 liters of water is not only necessary for your overall well-being, it also helps with vaginal dryness, which is a very common symptom of menopause. And then comes your mental well-being. So mental well-being, mindfulness, and whatever your hobbies you're used to, something you have to do for your mind, like meditation, prayer, whatever it may be for that individual. So you'll have to look at it from the diet aspect, from the physical aspect, and the mental aspect. So all this well-being, and last but not least, is sleep. Sleep hygiene has to be maintained. Off the screen time 1 hour before sleep, maintaining a sleep routine even at weekends. All of these is what forms a lifestyle advice.
Okay. That's quite a lot to take in. That's quite a lot to take into, honestly. So, when you tell this to a patient, won't they be feeling overwhelmed? Because I'm sure that every other person who has been in the who's going through the menopause, like you said, they must be on the peak of their career and they have teenage kids and every other commitments that they have to take care of. And how do you think they would find the time for themselves in this chaotic lifestyle that they are
I
living?
think, don't you think menopause brings into focus the need to put yourself first?
Absolutely, but not many of the women put themselves first.
They have to.
And it's very difficult for them to actually think that they come first, especially in our culture where we have to put our family first. They, be it men or women, they take a back seat. They work for the family rather than themselves. Don't you think
True.
that?
No, I totally agree. That's why I said all our advice has to be tailored to the individual patient
Mhm.
and what they can apply in their life, in their homes.
Okay. So have you had any patient who has been leading this chaotic life, and then when you told them to do these kind of changes, they applied it religiously and they were very happy to
I
see the
I
difference?
think each one of them takes on the advice and applies what they can.
Okay.
That's we can't be prescriptive. Guidance, the advice is given as a guidance. It's not a protocol. So it's people have benefited and it just signposts them to what are the areas they need to address.
Okay.
So at least they know there is non-medical, non-hormonal interventions that they can try. And many are willing to try that first, try the lifestyle modifications first, rather than going to HRT again from the same culture, like you're saying. The same culture also precludes them from taking any hormones.
That's right.
That cultural belief is there.
Yes.
So they would rather try lifestyle modification in the way they know, in the way each and every woman can apply in her, according to her circumstance.
Okay.
So it works both ways.
So you're talking about the HRT, that is hormone replacement therapy, right? So what exactly a woman should consider before she comes to conclusions that she has to start this?
Okay. So first of all, we need to know what are the symptoms that can be addressed by the woman needs to ask herself what is her primary, what are her symptoms that is affecting her quality of life,
Okay.
and what is the relief she would like to see, what
Mhm.
does she want to achieve,
Okay.
and what are her risk that we need to know. Is there a personal history of breast cancer, cardiovascular history, stroke history, clots in the legs or lungs, active bleeding, active
Okay.
liver disease, unexplained vaginal bleeding? All these are contraindications to starting HRT. So we need to know whether she is a candidate for HRT.
Okay.
And so everything will be based on what is the symptom, what we want to achieve, whether she is the right candidate for it.
Okay. So, how do you guide patients who are looking for such medical interventions but struggling with symptoms?
So,
Who are hesitant to go for medical interventions but they are struggling with
yeah.
symptoms?
So in that
Put it
case,
right.
when they have, when they are suffering with symptoms, but they are hesitant about HRT, means there is some fear.
Okay.
So I try to empathize. So first of all, we need to empathize with her fears and you respect her fears.
Okay.
Because there's not a lot of research available out there about a hormone replacement therapy in menopause. So it is shrouded with a lot of confusion, misinformation, and not that much evidence. Not much evidence is out there.
Okay.
So we have to respect her fears are valid, and then find out what the fears are. Is it her fear of putting something artificial in her body? Is she afraid of putting some hormones in her body? Did she see someone or hear of somebody who has had a negative experience with a hormone replacement therapy? Is it a fear of cancer? So we need to know what the fear is about and then give targeted evidence base according to address our fears. Because, for example, many of us say to us, if same from the Asian culture, it is a natural process. My grandmother went through this, my mother went through this. They didn't take HRT. Why should I take HRT? Then it is not being the current stressful life she's leading is not the one her mother or grandmother faced. So, which is why she's even entertaining because she's overwhelmed is why she has come to us to ask for information. And we are happy to signpost her and not to push a HRT. So that's education is the primary.
So, how can the family or the spousal support help in this case?
So again, based on the symptoms, if it is hot flushes and night sweats, if hot flushes, temperature is an issue. Temperature control in having a fan on in the winter, for example, and the light breathable fabrics as nighttime wear, breathable fabrics as the bedding, and having the air condition on in the winter. All of these will help, and even validating the woman's experience, saying, for example, if sleeplessness is an issue, if the spouse or the children were to say to her, it must be really awful for you to have not slept last night, that validates her experience and she feels loved and valued by the family. Even a simple statement, in addition to reducing some of her physical chores, like for example taking the workload that she has to do, sharing her workload at home without she having to ask without her having to ask for help, will all go a long way in helping her navigate this challenging times.
Okay. So, symptoms are subjective to every other person. So, you cannot generalize the symptoms. So, what one person has been experiencing need not be experienced by the other person
It's
as
a
well.
spectrum.
Okay.
It's a spectrum, and the severity varies from person to person.
Okay.
One might have the worst night sweats, the other might have the worst irregular periods, and the other person will have nothing. Only anxiety and brain fog, or someone else will have no symptoms at all. But even the ones we are saying they have no symptoms, all of us, all women are losing the muscle mass and the bone mass and increasing your cardiovascular risk. So whether treatment has to be based only for women who have the vasomotor symptoms and irregular periods, or should it be offered to all, is a question we are debating ourselves.
Okay. So, are hallucinations and something similar to the symptoms that they are experiencing? Because I know somebody who has gone through it, and then it was said that it was because of menopause that she is going through it.
No, I'm not. I'm not aware. No, hallucination is not one of the menopause.
Not exactly hallucination. It's just that they get, maybe it is night sweats, and they get scared that there's somebody watching them.
No, I think that requires psychiatric evaluation.
Okay, so maybe that's not
There's an
what
underlying
psychiatric.
disorder.
Yeah. So, doctor, now we have completed all the serious questions, and now it is time for some fun and interactive questions. So, I have a set of questions for you where you have to just answer true or false based on menopause talks which we are talking right now. So, first question is, skipping period in your late 40s is always normal.
It's false
Okay. Why is it false, doctor?
because it's not always normal.
Okay. Hot flashes means you're definitely in menopause.
Again, it's false because you need not be in menopause to have hot flashes. Occasionally, people experience it and they're not in menopause.
Okay. Lifestyle changes like yoga and diet can ease menopause symptoms.
Yeah, it's true, very true.
Okay. Premature menopause always makes pregnancy impossible.
False. We
Okay.
said 5 to 10%.
Right. Okay. A husband joining his wife's menopause consultation is a positive sign.
Very true. I would agree with that because there's some already understanding and insight into the wife's problems, and they're approaching the symptoms as a team effort and rather than making it a her problem.
Okay. That's nice. So, what is one common myth about menopause which you wish people would stop believing?
Stop normalizing the menopausal symptoms and stop believing it is only in your head. It's for
Okay.
real.
It's for real. Okay. Is there any patient story that has always stayed with you that you would like to share with us?
Yes, particularly the lady in her 40s who came to me with a history of irregular periods. And we have done the investigation, ruled out cancer, and established it was perimenopause that was causing her symptoms. And their main issue at home was her lack of interest in sex, and there's a discordancy between the husband and the wife in terms of sexual needs. Once she understood why she was not able to respond equally,
Mm-hmm.
She said all I needed to do was understand the problem. I don't need treatment.
Okay, that's great.
Yes.
There are certain times where a patient, when they understand what exactly has to be changed, then they don't require intervention, medical
I
intervention.
totally
Right?
agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So, finally, what message would you like to give our listeners, the women who are listening to it, about menopause and the challenges that they face through this?
Um, so, as I said earlier, menopause is not it should not be treated with the shame, stigma, or taboo. Speaking up and sharing your symptoms is not only going to empower you, but also introduce changes and improve the well being of women across the globe. That is what we all should do, speak up, share it, so everyone benefits from it.
Okay. So, Dr. Nirmala, thank you so much for joining us today. It was great having you here in our podcast and for sharing this wisdom, your stories and your compassion. It was great to listen to. And conversations like this, it reminds us that not every other woman is going through this, and we should not normalize the menopause talks. It is there, and it is high time that we address it. And the journey of every other woman deserves understanding, support, and openness. And thanks for letting us know about this. And once again, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Ashwya, and thank you for allowing me to speak on something that is very close to my heart.
It's always my pleasure, Doctor. Thank you so much. To all our listeners, we hope today's episode helps you see menopause not as an ending, but as a transition into new chapter of strength and possibility. Whether it's through lifestyle changes, medical support, or simply talking about it, every woman deserves to feel seen and supported in this phase. If you found this episode helpful, do share it with a friend, a sister, or anyone who might need to hear it. And remember, no woman should have to walk through this journey alone. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time, take care and keep the conversations going.